Nobody noticed the woman with the mop. That was perhaps the most important thing about her. She arrived every evening at precisely 7:15, long after the last executive had loosened his tie and called his driver. She moved through the marble corridors of Hargrove Capital like a quiet tide, steady, invisible, leaving everything cleaner than she found it. For 10 years she had scrubbed the same floors, emptied the same wastebaskets, and polished the same glass walls that reflected a skyline she would never own. Her name was Elena Manalo. She was 53 years old, originally from a small coastal town in the Philippines called Donsol, and she had not once in a decade been greeted by her first name inside that building. Most people called her the cleaning lady. Some didn't call her anything at all. She didn't complain. Complaining required the belief that someone was listening, and Elena had learned long ago that certain people in certain buildings had trained themselves not to hear the sound of a mop bucket rolling down a hallway. She had trained herself in turn not to need them to. She came, she worked, she left before the morning shift arrived. She deposited her paycheck every 2 weeks into an account she had been quietly, steadily, patiently filling for years. The account wasn't for her. It never had been. Hargrove Capital occupied the top 4 floors of a glass tower in downtown Chicago. Its founder, Richard Hargrove, had built it from nothing, or so he told the story. The truth, as with most origin myths, was more complicated. He had built it from inheritance, from connections, and from a particular talent for making himself appear indispensable in rooms where he was merely present. He was 61 years old, broad-shouldered, silver-haired, and possessed of the specific brand of confidence that comes not from achievement, but from never once having been told no. He employed 412 people. He knew the names of perhaps 30. The layoffs were announced on a Tuesday in November when the Chicago wind had turned mean and the sky sat low and gray over the lake. 200 employees received emails at 9:04 in the morning informing them that their positions had been eliminated in alignment with the company's strategic restructuring. By 10:30, security had begun escorting people out. It was efficient. It was cold. And it was, Richard told his remaining executives over lunch that afternoon, simply business. Elena had already been gone by then. She worked nights, but her supervisor called her at noon to tell her that the cleaning contract had been cut as well, effective immediately. The outsourced cleaning firm was among the vendor relationships being terminated. 14 years of combined service between Elena and her 2 colleagues ended in a phone call that lasted under 3 minutes. She was already putting on her coat when her daughter called. Lily Manalo was 31 years old and the founder and CEO of Navarro Logistics, a freight and supply chain company she had built from a single rented truck and a spreadsheet she kept on a second-hand laptop. She had grown it over 8 years into a firm that managed distribution contracts across 6 states and employed 119 people. Most of them she knew by name. She had not told her mother what Navarro Logistics had become. Not entirely. Elena knew her daughter had a business, knew she worked hard, knew she sent money home to cousins in Donsol and lit candles at Mass every Sunday for the father who had died when Lily was 12. Elena did not know that her daughter's company was, at the time of that November Tuesday, the single largest service provider to Hargrove Capital's Midwest distribution network. She did not know that the contract was worth $41 million annually. She did not know that Lily had been watching. She had been watching for 8 months. It had started accidentally. Lily's operations manager had flagged an irregularity in Hargrove's vendor payment timelines, pattern of delayed settlements that suggested Internal cash flow problems the company's public statements didn't reflect. In investigating, Lily had pulled employment records, turnover data, supplier reviews. What she found, threaded through the numbers, was a portrait of a company that treated its people like furniture. High executive retention, catastrophic lower-tier turnover, complaints buried, grievances settled quietly. And at the very bottom of the organizational chart, barely visible, the names of the cleaning and facilities staff. One of those names was her mother's. Lily had said nothing. She had continued the contract, continued the payments, and watched. She told herself she was being professional. She told herself she was gathering information. She did not tell herself the truth, which was that she was waiting for something she couldn't name, for the moment that would make the decision for her. The phone call from Elena on that Tuesday afternoon made the decision for her. Her mother's voice was calm. It was always calm. Elena Manalo had buried a husband, raised 2 children alone in a foreign country, and worked 30 years of night shifts without once, in Lily's memory, raising her voice in self-pity. She described the termination the way she might describe a change in weather. "The contract is done, Anak. But don't worry, I'll find something." Lily listened. She said, "Okay, Mama, I'll talk to you tonight." Then she hung up and called her attorney. The cancellation notice arrived at Hargrove Capital's offices at 3:47 that same afternoon. $41 million in annual revenue, gone with 30 days' notice, citing a contractual exit clause Lily's legal team had quietly ensured was bulletproof 18 months earlier. The reason listed was brief. Material breach of vendor partnership standards, specifically relating to workplace conduct and labor practices. Richard Hargrove read the letter twice. Then he called his COO, then his CFO, then his head of legal. Each conversation ended the same way, with the confirmation that the clause was valid, the notice was binding, and Navarro Logistics was not required to elaborate further. He had never heard of Navarro Logistics before that afternoon. By the next morning, he had a full briefing. The company, its revenue, its growth trajectory, and its CEO, a photograph of a young Filipino woman in a gray blazer, looking directly into the camera with an expression that Richard's assistant described, somewhat inadequately, as calm. He requested a meeting. His assistant sent the email at 9 hours a.m. The reply came at 9:47. Ms. Manalo is available Thursday at 2 p.m. She asks that Mr. Hargrove come to the Navarro offices. He noted that she had not offered to come to him. He noted it and said nothing, and confirmed Thursday at 2 p.m. The Navarro Logistics offices were not what Richard expected. He had prepared himself privately for something modest, a reminder of the distance between their two worlds. Instead, the building was clean and purposeful, the lobby staffed by a receptionist who greeted him by name and offered him coffee. The walls held framed photographs, trucks on highways, workers in warehouses, a woman in a hard hat laughing with a forklift operator. No abstract art, no marble, just evidence of actual work. Lily kept him waiting 8 minutes. Not long enough to be rude, long enough to be deliberate. When she walked in, Richard stood on a reflex of social habit and took in the woman across from him. She was younger than he expected, though he wasn't sure why that surprised him. She wore a simple dark blazer and no jewelry except small gold earrings. She moved without hurry. She extended her hand and shook his firmly. "Mr. Hargrove, thank you for coming, Ms. Manalo." He smiled, the boardroom smile, the one that had worked for 30 years. "I appreciate you making the time. I think there may have been some miscommunication that led to—" "There wasn't," she said pleasantly. She gestured to the chair across from her. "Please sit down." He sat. She placed a single folder on the table between them, but did not open it. "I've been a vendor partner of Hargrove Capital for 4 years," she said. "I've watched how your company operates. I've read the internal reviews from your facilities staff, your warehouse temps, your cleaning contractors." She paused. "I have a particular interest in cleaning contractors." Something in her tone made Richard still. "I'm sorry?" Lily turned slightly in her chair and nodded toward her desk, where a framed photograph stood facing outward. Richard's eyes moved to it. A graduation ceremony. A young woman in a cap and gown holding her diploma grinning wide. Beside her stood an older woman in a floral dress, beaming, holding the young woman's arm with both hands. He recognized the older woman. He didn't know her name, but he recognized her face, the way you recognize wallpaper, the way you recognize the sound of an elevator. He had passed her in the hallway. He had stepped around her mop bucket. He had, on at least 2 occasions that surfaced now from some distant register of memory, looked directly through her without seeing her. "That's my mother," Lily said. "She cleaned your offices for 10 years. The room was very quiet. Richard looked at the photograph for a long moment. Then he looked at Lily. The boardroom smile had disappeared. Something underneath it, something he had not used in a long time, was trying to surface. "I didn't," he began. "No," Lily agreed without unkindness. "You didn't." She did not shout. She did not perform. She opened the folder and walked him through it. 10 years of Elena's employment records. Performance reviews that were never given because no one bothered. Wage stagnations. The specific Tuesday morning when his senior vice president of operations had walked past a woman on her knees scrubbing a spill from the lobby floor and said, loudly enough for the security guard to hear, "Can we get someone competent in here?" Elena had been on her knees. She had not responded. She had finished cleaning the floor. Lily's voice remained even throughout. She was not angry, or if she was, it lived somewhere beneath the surface. Controlled and purposeful, fuel rather than fire. She was making a case, not for a contract, not for money, but for a principle so basic it should not have required a boardroom and a $41 million negotiation to establish. "I'm not here to destroy your company," she said. "I'm not here for revenge. I want one thing." She closed the folder. "I want you to see them. The people who make your building function. I want you to learn their names. And I want it to happen in front of your company, not in a press release, not in an email, in person." Richard was quiet for a long moment. "And if I do that," he said carefully, "you'll reinstate the contract?" Lily shook her head slowly. "No," she said. "If you do it because you think it will get you the contract, don't bother. I'll know the difference." She met his eyes. "I'm asking you to do it because it's right. What happens with the contract after that depends on whether I believe you." He looked at the photograph again. The woman in the floral dress. The woman who had moved through his corridors for 10 years, invisible, diligent, uncomplaining. The woman whose daughter had built a $41 million company from a single truck and was now sitting across from him asking him, simply, to be decent. He nodded once, slowly. "Tell me their names," he said quietly. "All of them." The meeting happened the following Monday morning, before the markets opened. Richard Hargrove stood in the atrium of Hargrove Capital with every employee assembled. Those who remained, those who had been let go and invited back for this one morning. He held a single sheet of paper. On it were the names of every member of the facilities and cleaning staff who had worked in the building over the past 5 years. He had practiced the pronunciations. His assistant had helped him. He read each name aloud. He spoke briefly about what each person's work had contributed. The building that ran, the floors that shone, the lobbies that made clients feel the company was capable and worthy of trust. He did not dress it up. He did not make it a speech about corporate values. He said plainly that these people had been treated as invisible, and that was wrong, and that it was his failure and no one else's. In the back of the atrium, one of the former cleaning staff, a Guatemalan man named Arturo, who had worked there for 6 years, put his hand over his mouth. His shoulders shook once. He made no sound. Nobody laughed. Nobody checked their phones. When Richard finished, he folded the paper and put it in his jacket pocket. The room was very still. Then someone started to clap. Slowly at first, then joined by others, until the atrium was full of it. Richard did not smile the boardroom smile. He stood with his hands at his sides and accepted it the way a man accepts a verdict. Quietly, and with the understanding that this was a beginning, not an absolution. 3 days later, Lily reinstated the contract. She sent no explanation. Only a brief email, 1 line, "I believe you. Let's continue," Elena called her daughter that evening. Having heard through her old colleagues that something had happened at the building, that names had been read aloud, that people had cried. "Was that you?" Elena asked. Lily was quiet for a moment. "It was both of us, Mama." Elena made a small sound, not quite a laugh, not quite a cry. "Something in between. You should eat," she said finally. "You work too hard." "I know," Lily said. "I learned it from someone." After they hung up, Lily sat for a while in the quiet of her office, looking at the photograph on her desk. Her mother's face, that grin, those hands wrapped around her arm as if she was the most precious cargo she had ever carried. Outside, Chicago moved on, indifferent, enormous, full of invisible people doing invisible work that kept the whole city from falling apart. Somewhere in it, a woman named Elena Manalo was probably already thinking about her next shift, already planning, already giving. Some people move through the world like weather, constant, unnoticed, and absolutely essential. It had taken a boardroom to say it out loud, but the truth had always been there, written in 10 years of clean floors and quiet footsteps and a daughter who had watched and waited and decided that enough was enough.